Superman and Lois is on its third season, and it's finally time to introduce one of the DC Universe's best villains. Lex Luthor will finally be back on the big screen soon enough, so let's dive deeper into what we can expect from his introduction in the show. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the new Lex Luthor that will appear in the Arrowverse spin-off show, so stay tuned. First up, Lex Luthor is coming to Superman and Lois. The Arrowverse has its fair share of interesting villains, and despite being one of many, Lex has made quite the name for himself ever since he was first introduced in Supergirl. Now, Jon Cryer fills the role of this particular villain well, but unfortunately, he won't be able to play a role in the new series. This brings us to Superman and Lois. Out of all the recent DC shows that have made their way to different platforms, such as the CW, this particular show has attracted the most attention. The show is already in its third season and is extremely well liked among DC fans. There's a good reason behind all the hype it's getting though. Superman and Lois hasn't disappointed in any aspect, from the plot to the graphics and acting. Everything's been on point. Viewers are absolutely obsessed with how the series has portrayed Clark Kent as a husband and father, alongside being one of the most powerful heroes in his universe. What's more, fans already love Tyler Hoechlin as Superman, and they're looking forward to what Lex's casting will bring. Now, proper casting is extremely important for a show, and can go as far as defining how successful it'll be. So since the series has managed to satisfy the viewers up until now, expectations are high, and it'll be quite disappointing if the directors fail to do Lex justice. Let's take a look at what Jon Cryer had to say about the news. The whispers that Superman and Lois's directors are searching for a new Lex Luthor have finally made it to Jon Cryer's ears. Jon portrayed Lex perfectly, making the character's emotions and goals his own. In the process, he made the character both chilling and eerily understandable. Jon confirmed on Twitter that there are no chances fans will see him behind Lex in Superman and Lois. Disappointing indeed, but it's still exciting to try and guess who will take his place. Tyler Hoechlin also gave his opinion on Lex being introduced to the show. Recently, while speaking at Fan Expo in Dallas, he was asked whether he'd like to go up against Lex Luthor, a rather off-putting question. After all, who wouldn't like to go against one of the best villains in the DC Universe? It seems like Tyler was of the same opinion, because he responded that it was ridiculous not to hope to be able to fight Lex. The actor stated that it would be an incredible addition to the show. He also specifically mentioned Jon, and seemed eager to be able to work with him, both on stage and off stage. Unfortunately, though, that won't be happening. Still, Superman and Lex are one of the greatest rivalries in the history of storytelling, and Jon Cryer or not, the episodes featuring the villain will probably end up being the show's most watched ones. Coming up, Tyler Hoechlin will be going up against Lex Luthor. The most recent live-action adaptation of Lex Luthor we saw was in Titans. Titus Welliver portrayed Lex, who was on the show for only one episode. It was insinuated by the creatives of the show that Warner Bros. Would only allow them to use the character in a small capacity. If that is the case, it begs the question, what exactly would the difference between Superman and Lois and the Titans show be if it is allowed to use the iconic villain character for a number of episodes, while Titans weren't allowed to use it for more than one? It still hasn't been revealed what role Lex will play in the new season. It might turn out to be just one episode, or a considerable role similar to Jon Cryer's time in Supergirl. Fans have continued to speculate about Lex's part in the show and who will play the big bad. A number of fan castings have already started making rounds on the internet, but no matter who ends up playing him, without a doubt, fans will be delighted to get yet another live-action adaptation of Lex Luthor. Maybe the new DC Cinematic Universe being thought up by Peter Safran and James Gunn will also add its own version of the character into the mix. Everything will be cleared up eventually. For now, audiences can look forward to the new season of Superman and Lois, with the third season reportedly airing on the 18th of January, 2023. Finally, there is information indicating Lex Luthor is here to stay. Since the directors need to find a new Lex, casting details have been released to try and attract the right people to the job, and let's just say they're extremely interesting. The listing stated that the role calls for a white male in his late 40s, but that obviously isn't the interesting part. Lex was described as a terrifying businessman who was amoral and rogue. After all, someone who's hell-bent on destroying everyone who he thinks may be responsible for ruining his life isn't someone you want to mess with. A chilling description indeed, but one that describes the villain perfectly. Lex is already a brutal character. From the looks of it, he'll be even more dangerous. We'll have to wait and see how the directors of the show manage to fit this particularly determined and violent villain among the rest of the characters in Season 3 of Superman and Lois. The information given by the THS also indicated that Lex won't be a short-term character, but will appear in the show frequently. It's starting to sound like a big part of Season 3 will focus on the villain and fuse him into the storyline. If we're lucky enough, he may even end up being upgraded rated to a regular by the time Season 4 is released. Of course, nothing is confirmed, but rumors and different reports point to the fact that Lex is here to stay. Now, moving on to some of the actors that may end up playing Lex Luthor. First up at number 5, we have Tom Hanks. After all the buzz regarding a new casting of Lex Luthor, it brings us to the most important question: who will be taking on the role? Previously, Lex Luthor was played by Jesse Eisenberg on the big screen and John Cryer in the Arrowverse, but it seems they weren't Warner Bros. First picks to play the character. Perhaps one of the most interesting details from Batman v Superman behind the scenes is that Tom Hanks was considered to star as Luthor. This was probably when the script was very different, because Luthor in the film was very young and inexperienced, but a dangerous foe for Superman nonetheless. If Hanks had been chosen for the role, the movie would have turned out quite differently, and he might have only been considered because he once said in an interview that he wished to play the bad guy against Batman. Perhaps Tom could play the role of Lex in the CW's Superman and Lois. Granted, it's difficult for that to happen since he's a massive star and would probably have to take a huge pay cut. Up next at number 4, we've got Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper was also considered to play Batman v Superman's very unpopular version of Lex Luthor. If he'd taken the role, he would have become one of the few actors who'd starred in both the Marvel and DC cinematic universes, since he plays Rocket in the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers movies. Though Cooper didn't play Lex, he was involved in another DC project. He was an executive producer on Todd Phillips' 2019 movie, Joker. Not to mention, Cooper has worked with Phillips before on the Hangover trilogy too. So if Bradley can be convinced to play Lex this time around, without a doubt, it'll be a great boon for Superman and Lois. Now at number 3, we have Matt Damon. Matt Damon has made cameos in Thor: Love and Thunder, Thor: Ragnarok, and Deadpool 2, yet he hasn't played any major roles in a superhero or comic book movie up till now. In fact, he was taken into consideration to play Mysterio in Spider-Man: Far From Home, but Jake Gyllenhaal eventually took that role. Similarly, in DC, Matt was considered to play Lex Luthor, and if he'd gotten the role, then he definitely would have portrayed the character in a very different manner than Jesse Eisenberg. But alas, it seems like the chances of that happening now are pretty low. Instead, Matt could go for the role of Lex on Superman and Lois, so that fans could finally see his version of the iconic character. Then at number 2, we have Michael Fassbender. Michael Fassbender has shown his talents in Shame, Inglourious Bastards, and X-Men First Class, and in most of them, he was highly intimidating, and he nailed his roles. His portrayal of Lex Luthor would certainly be dark and show just how much Lex abhors Superman and wants to kill him. The casting of Fassbender as Lex has gotten a lot of support from fans, but the chances of it happening are pretty low since he's already played Magneto, an on and off villain in the X-Men franchise, so he might be unwilling to jump into another role playing as a comic book villain. Lastly, at number 1, we have Jon Hamm. Jon Hamm is another actor who's often been supported by fans to take the role of Lex Luthor. This isn't surprising for a memorable take on the character. Hamm is experienced in the roles of American corporate executives, and he has a talent for making the villain a believable threat to the protagonist for the audience. What's more, Hamm even did a video for Funny or Die in which he played Luthor, and although the video was only for comedic purposes, it was actually a great portrayal of a modern version of the villain. That's a wrap for this video. Are you excited to see Lex Luthor finally make an appearance in Superman and Lois? Which actor do you think will suit the role best? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.